I've heard probiotics being described in the past as like dropping off a group of 20 people in the middle of Manhattan and assuming that they're going to be able to clean up the entire city and all the people within it. And I think that example is alluding to the vastness of the microbiome, relative to taking something like a probiotic. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on probiotics and what positive impact they can have on the microbiome and thus performance.
Mm-hmm. So I'm a PhD researcher, not an MD, so I don't have direct medical advice. But from a PhD perspective, probiotics do make a lot of sense. But I do think that probiotics need to be incorporated into sort of a treatment plan with other elements. Because if you, for example, have a very imbalanced gut microbiome, we often use the word dysbiosis to mean that. So when we're talking about a microbiome community, it's a little like the rainforest or something. You could have a part of the rainforest where animals are eating different animals, and there are all these different relationships happening, but those relationships are happening in balance so that the community is basically stable and flourishing. Now, with the human microbiome, it's similar. You can have many organisms, and some of them are, in a sense, attacking each other, infecting each other, but it's happening within a state of balance, and all the relationships are playing out so that the overall state of balance is okay. But sometimes good bacteria that are more important for health promoting processes become diminished, and bad organisms take over a microbiome community. And that can lead to a general collective shift in the composition and activity of the organisms there. And we refer to that often as dysbiosis, which basically is like an imbalance of those ecosystems, right? So if you take a probiotic and your gut is in a state of dysbiosis, in other words, the organisms there are already out of balance, the probiotic may have a little trouble figuring out how it's going to fit in, so that you just put a new influx of organisms into an already confused community. So I would think that you want to think through at least a couple steps, in my opinion, first. One is that a consideration for chronic symptoms or just health is that the barrier of the gut when it comes to the gut microbiome is important, right? So if there's an imbalanced microbiome community in the gut, that can lead to inflammation that causes the lining of the gut to become worn down. In simple terms, that's sometimes referred to as leaky gut. And so what can happen then is organisms that are in the gut leak into the blood, and there they stimulate many more inflammatory processes that are detrimental for the patient. So one of the things I think is important with probiotics is you want to make sure the gut isn't too leaky before you take a probiotic, because you then run the risk that you take a probiotic and it just becomes some of the organism that leaks into the blood, right? Because even a beneficial organism, you really don't want ending up in your blood, right? So there are some supplements that I know some people take to sort of strengthen the gut barrier lining, to work on that. In other words, sort of working on the lining of the gut itself and the integrity of the gut itself makes sense to me before using probiotics. I think you want to make sure that you take care of any potential pathogens in the gut as well. So sometimes, depending on the person, there may be an overgrowth of bad bacteria or a pathogen in the gut, like a virus or something like that, that's detrimental. And it probably makes sense to try to deal with that first, to use some kind of antibiotic or antimicrobial to knock those bad organisms down first, before you then repopulate with the probiotic that's better, right? That's the strategy that's used in a number of conditions or where people treat microbiome imbalances, is use an antibiotic to knock down the bad players, bring probiotics in at that point to bring in the better players, right? So the timing there matters.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.